everyone. My name is Bryce Whittington, and I am here with the first ever episode of the World of Whitt Studios Creative Process Podcast. And I am so excited to share this moment with you, as this is my first ever podcast. And there's a lot of things I'm going to be learning. There's a lot of different things I'm going to apply to this in the future. But right out the gate, I'm super excited to get started, and I'm very excited to share this with all of you. All right, so what is the creative process going to be about, and what kind of things I'm going to talk about? What kind of guests am I going to have on the show? Right, you're going to have a lot of questions about things like that, and I'm going to answer that right now. So first of all, the creative process. Like I think I said earlier, I am a writer and an artist. Okay, I do a lot of work on comics. Right now, most of my work is available for free on services like Webtoon, Tapas, Comic Fury, Global Comic, a lot of other things like that. So if you're ever interested in making comics, I'm going to be giving a lot of advice about how to go about doing that. What are some tricks? What are some tips and things like that about the writing process and the art process? So I will be working a lot on things like that. Now, also, I'm going to talk a lot about what I'm interested in, right? What am I reading right now? What am I watching? What am I listening to? Things like that. What types of media am I looking at in order to be inspired? What do I think is going to impact a lot of the work that I'm going to do? Things like that. So I will be breaking down things like movies, TV shows, comics, music, things like that. If it is something that might inspire me and hopefully you to create, I will be talking about it, all right? I think that what you watch, listen to, read, things like that, it's going to make a huge difference on your creative process, right? So since I want to explore that process in these podcasts, I'm going to be talking a lot about what I am reading, watching, or listening to. Now, this is not a review video. I will not be breaking down what I don't like or things like that of people's work. Instead, I'm just going to talk about what the work is, and I'm going to talk about what I think that I can take away from it, and hopefully you can take away from it, and how that might affect all of us and the work that we make. All right, so that's going to be very exciting. So right out the gate, I want to talk about the work that I create. Like I said, a lot of it's webcomics. First of all, my favorite webcomic that I'm working on, I've been working on it for a very long time, is titled Cosmos in Crisis. Right now, part 1 is coming out weekly. Actually, it's coming out twice a week on, like I said, services like Webtoon, Tapas, Comic Fury, and Global Comics. So you can definitely check it out there. Basically, it's a story of this big alien called a Jalarax, okay? And his dad gets murdered, his planet gets destroyed, and pretty much he's just caught in the crossfire of some crazy political things going on in the galaxy. Well, on his quest for revenge to kill the man who killed his dad, he gets caught up in the revolution that his dad was a part of so many years ago, and he joins with a band of other rebels and resistance members as they try to tear down the evil Inquisition led by this wicked tyrant named Krog, a fast-talking space general named Primarchus. On that journey, he meets people like Arkeros, the previous leader of the Resistance. He meets the current leader of the Resistance. He meets a few different people of a space crew. Frankie, the tech engineer guy. You've got Rachel, she's the ship's medic. You've got Rex, he's a security guard. And there's just all kinds of different characters. It's a lot of world building. There's a lot of stuff going on there. It's a fascinating story. It's a lot of my friends pretty much bring it back to think about the old school Masters of the Universe, right? When you watch it, you're not going there to see this next Shakespearean play, right? You're going there to see this giant hero as he destroys crazy monsters and aliens and enemies, right? So that's a lot of what this is. Okay, there are a lot of figurative language and symbolism, things like that in this story, but overall, it's just a very fun, exciting story of tearing down the man and building up something new. Okay, so you definitely want to check out Cosmos in Crisis. Following that, okay, my next comic that I created is called Nice Stories to Share with Family. All right, so the funny thing about that title is when I was trying to title this comic that I was creating, I was having trouble, right? I was looking at all the things that this story is, and I really couldn't put my thumb on the perfect title to sum up the idea of this story. Finally, I came up with it, all right? I came up with it by deciding, what is this story not? It is not a nice story, and you should probably not share it with your family. And I said, that's exactly what we're going with. Nice stories to share with family. All right, this comic's entirely in black and white. It's a noir, crime-esque, violent story of reckless Ryan Pitchings, and he gets framed for setting up the family, which is like a old-school mob organization. At least it is on the surface. All right, and Ryan Pitchings gets framed for setting them up, and the story continues from there. Basically, he's chased down by every enforcer you can think of, and he goes on some crazy adventures while trying to escape the wrath of the family. All right, so that's Nice Stories to Share with Family. Like I said, the entire thing is drawn in black and white art. It's very different than Cosmos in Crisis, which is fully colored all the way through. In Cosmos in Crisis, I take my time, I draw the entire thing, then I ink it, then I ink it again on my iPad, and then I color it in its entirety. So it's a lot of very vibrant, bright colors. Remember, I said I was trying to use a lot of inspiration from things like old school cartoons, such as He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, things like that. Nice Stories to Share with Family is very much not that. The art is in black and white. I use inspiration from things like Sin City and a lot of other noir art, okay? Old school comics that are drawn in black and white. I use a lot of inspiration from that. My main art style, a lot of it goes back to the Kirby-esque look, right? Jack Kirby, 1960s Marvel artist. I absolutely adore his work, and I go back to that a lot. So I have all my Fantastic Four collected editions and things like that, and I go ahead and I look at his art, and throughout the several years, I've tried to use a lot of his influence in my work. So you'll see a lot of influence from him in things that I make, especially with Nice Stories to Share with Family, because since it's in black and white, the focus is a lot more on the art. Now, like I said, Reckless Ryan Pitchings finds a lot of crazy characters trying to chase him down, and some of the stories are pretty lighthearted, and some of them are pretty cartoonish villains, some of them are not. Some of them talk in heavy alliteration, some of them do not. So you definitely want to check out this story because there's a lot of crazy things going on. Okay, and then moving on from Nice Stories to Share with Family, my next comic, and I hate to say it, but I think this probably will become my most popular comic probably ever. It's called Lil Poochie and Baby Nugget. All right, now think about what I just told you guys about Cosmos and Nice Stories. I am a huge fan of action. I love superhero stories. I love action movies. I love things like that. This is very much out of my comfort zone, but it's a great thing for me to work on and to try to improve my art and my writing because it's in a very different style. Now, why did I say it'll probably be my most popular? Because it's absolutely adorable. Okay, basically, Lil Poochie is this adorable little puppy that lives on a farm. Okay, and his best friend is named Baby Nugget, and you can probably guess he is a tiny baby chicken. All right, and these two go on crazy adventures together where they pretty much have a quick one-liner, a two-line joke where they bounce back and forth. Sometimes it's hilarious, sometimes it's just kind of cute, but always it is very wholesome and adorable. Okay, so if you have not checked out Lil Poochie and Baby Nugget, I highly recommend you do. It's a very quick read. Every story I want to say is 2 panels, and it's got a little intro card. So it's a very quick read. It's something you can check out every day, and it'll put you in a great mood because I have to tell you, it is absolutely adorable. So definitely check out Lil Poochie and Baby Nugget. My final comic title that I'm working on right now is called Villainous Vector. This is another story that I've been working on for many years. I'm undecided yet of how long the story will go on. Cosmos in Crisis, I plan on having as a continuing series for a very long time. Villainous Vector, we'll see. Alright, right now I'm down to a 3-panel layout where it's kind of setting up the joke. We have a little bit in the middle, and then finally the punchline. It's a comedy comic about a supervillain who has already been defeated. Alright, when the story picks up, Villainous Vector's already been torn down. His real name is Nelson Frey. Nelson Frey, I hate to say it, he's kind of a loser. Alright, he doesn't really have very much going on for him, and he's trying to build back up this empire of evil that he thinks that he once had. He really didn't. He's never been that successful of a villain, but he sure thinks he has been, and he is doing his best to build his way back up to that. It's very funny. It's lighthearted humor. The first 3 episodes are pretty long to kind of get you an idea of the universe. After that, like I said, it breaks down into a shorter 3-panel setup. It's pretty great. I highly recommend you check that one out as well. So I post these stories 6 times a week, right? You got 7 days of the week. I post 6 of those days. I have 4 comics, so to publish that 6 times a week, some of them do get doubled up. So on Mondays, I start the week off strong with Lil Poochie and Baby Nugget. It's a great way to start your week. Nobody likes Mondays, but it is a great way to really get yourself in a good mood starting up your work week. After that, we go on to Tuesday, and on Tuesday, we have nice stories to share with family. That story goes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Then I have Cosmos in Crisis. It's coming out on Wednesdays and Fridays. And then to end my week, I have Villainous Vector coming out every Saturday. Alright, so we do that. It's posting 6 times a week. There's a lot of creativity that goes into that, though, as you can probably imagine. Like I said, that's 6 comics. It's 4 comics, but it's 6 episodes coming out a week. That means I have to do a lot of writing, a lot of drawing, and a lot of editing. I'm a very busy guy, if you can't tell. But that means that I've learned some tips and tricks from all of this process that I plan on exploring more in this podcast as it goes on. All right, so when I'm making these comics, okay, there's a system that I follow. I think it's a pretty common system, but I'm going to go ahead and explain it anyway. So first thing I do, as soon as I come up with this idea, I start trying to sketch up a look of this character. Usually once I can see the character, I can tell you his whole story. But I have to see him, I need him on paper. So I hit the sketchbook. I have a little book, let's see, it looks just like this, all right? And I go through this sketchbook and I fill it out as I go, okay? And I fill out anything that catches my attention, I will start drawing. Now look, a lot of stuff, if you look at it, I have a lot of things that I barely have anything drawn on it, and I draw an X through what I've drawn, and I keep moving, because most of what I'm doing is just trying to pinpoint this idea. I need to get it on paper. Then once I have the final look down, that's when I go in and I start putting together a story. All right, so I sit down usually I don't go to the laptop right away. I sit down and I go old school with pen and loose leaf paper. That loose leaf is in a notebook. I have 100 notebooks. They're all stacked up behind me over here on my desk. And I write, and I just write as much as I can do, okay? I take those characters. I start trying to do scenes before I start putting together a overall story. Once I have a few scenes drawn up, that's when I can get together and just start putting a story together around it. So once I have once I have a bunch of scenes put together in a notebook, that's when I go ahead on another page of the notebook, I start drawing out my plot. I still try to go by the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. I'm sure most people have heard of it. If you haven't, it's kind of a 12-step guide to any hero in any story ever. I use that a lot. I might not always stick to it, but when I'm starting to put together my stories, I do focus on that a lot. So the next part I do after I do scenes is I start putting together my plot using the hero's journey, but I also use a 3-act structure and all of that, beginning, middle, and end. I still use my introduction, my rising action, climax, falling action, resolution, all of that good stuff. I make sure that I go through as many different plot devices as I can to build up a solid plot. All right, after I have all that down, that's when I go to the laptop and I start typing up a script. That's probably the most time-consuming part of the entire writing process, obviously, I guess, is putting together my script, because now I have a character or a cast of characters, I have a plot, or at least a general idea of where the story should go, and I have a few scenes written up, but now I need to put it all together. So that's where I sit down and I start typing up my story, and it all just kind of comes together as I go. Now, as for the art, after I have a script ready, so now remember, I've already put together the look of my characters. So now I go to my sketchbook. Now I go to my sketchbook and I start putting together my my actual panels if I'm ready for that. Sometimes I need to put together a little bit more background, whether that's character design for some cast or crew, whether that's putting together some settings or some objects, things like that. Or maybe I just want to see what a scene looks like before I actually start drawing. But eventually I do sit down and I actually go into the art process. That's probably my favorite part of the entire process. I really love to draw, sitting at my desk with my paper and my pencil, and I just put it pencil to paper and I put it all together. It's definitely the most rewarding part of the entire thing to me. Definitely my favorite. That takes the longest amount of time out of the entire process, but eventually I move on to my iPad. Once I have the pencil drawing sketched into my scanned into my iPad, I go ahead and I ink the whole thing, and then I start coloring. The coloring process is not my favorite by any means, but I do work through it. It is very important to making comics or art of really any kind. If you have a comic and it is not colored, you are going to have a much more difficult time getting readers to tune in every week, all right? You have to think about all of your competition. Even if your black and white art makes your art, pop in a different type of way, all right? Think about, I told you, Nice Stories to Share a Family, fully in black and white. And I think that makes my art look better. Unfortunately, if you are just scrolling through 100 independent comics, you most likely won't press on the black and white one because it just doesn't pop as much as a colored comic does, right? You think about all the professional comics out there, almost all of them are fully colored. So you do have to do the coloring process. Even if you don't want to, usually you need to do that. I know I do. So if you look at Cosmos and Crisis, like I said, I use that one in a lot of examples because it is my favorite out of all of my works. But if you look at that, it is a very unique look because of the colors. All right. In that, I try to use my inspiration from classic cartoons or classic comics where the art was a lot more vibrant than it is now. Right. A lot of things now are toned down to make it look more realistic. But I think that if you go ahead and just really embrace the goofiness of old school comics and cartoons and you use that bright color, I think it can actually really benefit your comic. That's why I'm doing it with Cosmos and Crisis. So there's a lot of thought that has to go into the coloring part of the process, but definitely not as fun for me as the drawing part, the drawing stage. All right, so moving along, what have I been watching? So just about 2 weeks ago, maybe 1 week ago, Fantastic Four just came out, okay? And I went and saw it in theaters like so many other people. And I am a huge Fantastic Four person. I love them. I even sat through all the 3 other older movies. And so going into this one, I had a lot of hope, but I didn't know how much I could trust it. But it actually turned out really good. There were a lot of things I liked. The look of Galactus was phenomenal. I really loved his look. It was comic accurate while also looking somewhat real for a very unreal concept, right? The Devourer of Planets, this giant godly creature walking through the streets of Manhattan, and it still looked like it could exist in this universe. I thought that was phenomenal. The costumes I thought were great. It really does pay homage to the comics of the past, so I really loved that. I thought that the Thing was definitely about as comic accurate as you can get them. I was super impressed by Johnny Storm, right? I had no idea that they could actually make me a Human Torch fan. Not that I've never been a Human Torch fan, but to make him an important character in the story and not just the kid brother who is kind of in the way. I thought that was very impressive, and they made me actually care about the character. So, spoiler alert, but not really. Somewhere around the end, it looks like Johnny Storm is going to die, and he doesn't. But when it looked like that, I was very worried for a minute. And obviously, the superhero film at the beginning of their franchise, so chances are they're not going to kill off that kind of character. But the fact that they could, and the fact that I cared about it, really means that the writing there was pretty strong as far as developing characters. Reed, it could go either way. Obviously, Pedro Pascal is such an amazing actor. I think he did a phenomenal job as Reed Richards. However, I couldn't look past the mustache. It was driving me crazy. The entire movie, I'm seeing Reed Richards with a mustache. Now, obviously, in the comics, he has a beard a lot of the time. Totally cool with that. If you want to have your Reed Richards with a beard, and I know that Pascal had a little bit of beard going on, but it wasn't a Reed Richards beard. It was very much a mustache with a little bit of 5 o'clock shadow. That's a very minor critique, I guess, but I did wind up staring at the mustache for way too long. I thought that killing Susan Storm would have been such a crazy moment that really would have rocked the boat, and it would have made this movie seem that much better, because you'd be like, oh my gosh, they really just did that. Are they insane? They didn't. They brought Franklin Richards as Magical Powers, which I know it's out the comics, but him saving Susan Storm, it just felt a little forced to me. So I'm a big Fantastic Four fan. I'm so happy their movie is good. I really did enjoy the film. Is it my favorite movie? No. But is it my favorite Fantastic Four movie? It's probably yes. I really do like the 2005 one. I know it's not as good as we all remember it being, but it is entertaining, and it was a big part of a lot of people's childhoods. So I do think that that is a movie worth remembering, even if it's not as good as a lot of modern ones. It's probably not nearly as good as the new movie, but this Galactus was a whole lot better than the previous Galactus we had in the Rise of the Silver Surfer movie. I think they had a few spots with CGI for different things looked weak. Every once in a while, I don't know, the Thing would look less like a person and more like a thing. Honestly, maybe that means that they did a great job, but sometimes he would look less human to me. And some other things like that. The Silver Surfer occasionally would look a little odd. So they definitely could have patched up their CGI in a few spots. But overall, I was very impressed by that. And I was super impressed by the amount of time they spent developing these characters, which historically have not been treated as real characters. Instead, just kind of, we need to put a movie out. Let's hurry up and do it. Let's see. Also, I watched WWE Summer Slam. That was exciting. So far, I've only seen night 1. I am going to be watching night 2, hopefully tonight. Look, the Roman Reigns, Jey Uso versus Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker. It was very exciting. You know, we get to see Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, and he's doing this whole thing. We get to see Jey Uso, who has really become such an amazing star over the past couple years. We get to see them just finally getting their hands on Seth Rollins' guys. That was exciting. Getting to see Paul Heyman having to watch the original Bloodline beat up on Seth Rollins' guys. I thought that was phenomenal. So that match I was really, really enjoying. I actually did a sketch because I was enjoying it so much. And it's always important, no matter how much art you do, it's always important to continue practicing. So I went ahead and I drew, and I don't know if it'll focus now. There it is. I went ahead and drew a little bit from the match. We got Roman Reigns punching Braun Breaker, and you have Jey Uso kicking Big Bronson Reed in the face in the background. So I'm working right now on coloring that and editing it so I can put it on World of Whitt Studios on our Instagram page. It is a work in progress. It'll be on there pretty soon. But the fact that I sat there and did that shows you how great that was. I was very inspired by the storytelling they did during the match, so that was phenomenal. We had a lot of filler stuff in between, right? We had the Jelly Roll match. That was kind of funny, I guess. At the end of the night, we have CM Punk versus Gunther for the World Heavyweight Championship. And look, I could see from 10 miles away that clearly CM Punk was going to win this match. Chances are he probably told WWE Studios, the writers, or whoever, that if he was going to lose to John Cena for the WWE Championship, he would only do that if they would then give him the World Heavyweight Championship. I pretty much figured that from the moment he went against John Cena, that he would only lose. Obviously, he was going to lose that match, but he was only going to lose that match if they gave him some other title. That's just seems like his kind of thing. So, you know, the match was pretty good. They went back and forth for a while. They did all the greatest CM Punk greatest hits. He did all of his fun moves from our past and all that stuff. It was great. But then at the very end of the night, you know, he wins the belt and he's standing there and he's crying and he finally has the belt after 10 years gone and 2 years or whatever of trying to climb back up the ladder. He finally has it. Everything is right in the world. And then out of nowhere, here comes Seth Rollins. And a couple weeks ago, Seth Rollins got hurt on Monday Night Raw. He stretched out his knee or something. So we knew that he's been injured for a little while. So I just assumed his injury was real. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Seth Rollins comes out at the very end of the night. And he's on crutches and his legs in a huge brace and all that stuff. Well, he takes off the brace, he throws down the crutches, and he cashes in his Money in the Bank contract to beat CM Punk and win the World Heavyweight Championship. And that was the biggest plot twist, turnaround thing that I didn't see coming. And I hate to say I didn't see it coming, but I genuinely had no idea that was going to happen. So, very much enjoyed Night 1 of SummerSlam. I can't wait to watch Night 2 because that was absolutely insane. Alright, so moving on, alright, what am I reading right now? So, I just finished reading The Sun Also Rises, right? It was pretty good. It was rather uneventful. If you've never read it before, Ernest Hemingway, it's a story of some guys who just recently lived through World War I, and right after that, they have a lot of money and not a whole lot to do with it, and they do a lot of time jumping from cafe to cafe, which is like the bars of back then, and they're kind of just wasting money, and it's just a story of a lot of rich people doing a lot of rich people things. At one point, they do go on a fishing trip, and then after that, they go to the running of the bulls, and they have a big matador fight and things like that. It seems like there's about to be some huge climactic moment, but that moment never actually comes. It's just things kind of boil up and then sizzle back down. So there's not a whole lot of exciting action. So if you're looking for an action-packed book, don't go there. However, it is a very interesting look at designing and writing characters. Okay, every single one of these characters has their own flaws or their own things that they're trying to come to terms with, right? So the lady Brett, that's kind of the love interest throughout the whole thing. So her husband, kind of, sort of, he, or soon to be husband, right? So Mike, he owes a lot of people a lot of money. He gambles too much and he parties too much, and he doesn't have enough money to back all that up, so he owes a lot of people a lot of money, right? Then you have the main character, Jake, who's also the narrator. Jake has his own issues post-war. During the war he was injured, so post-war he's trying to come to terms with that injury, and he's in love with Lady Brett, but she can't, and she's kind of in love with him, but for reasons she can't really commit to that at the time. It's a huge thing, and it is very interesting the work he was able to do with these characters and to make you learn more about them. Then he has Khan, who they don't like as much, and then they really don't like him by the end of the story. So if you haven't already read it, that might be something for you to check out. But if you are looking for a huge action-packed thriller, this is not your story. This is a literary work where you're kind of just learning about the things going on in the lives of all of these people. I'd give it a pretty solid recommendation unless you're thinking, like I said, you're looking for an action thriller, in which case don't read this. But if you just want to see a very creative look at the lives of people post World War I, check it out. All right. After that, like I said, I'm a comic creator. I read a lot of comic books. Okay. For example, I have a stack right here. These are all comics I've read in the last few days, all right? I have a lot here. Most recently, I read the latest Daredevil comics. He's fighting this giant mushroom guy. It was very interesting. I'll give it that. The big mushroom guy. So basically the story so far has been that Daredevil has been in this apartment with his on-again, off-again love interest, and people started going missing. And then when he started trying to look into that, he gets infected by this crazy fungus stuff growing up his arm. Okay, and he's like abducted by the fungus or something, and eventually, typical superhero fashion, he breaks out. Now, what is really cool is when he breaks out, he still has that infection, so he's got these mushroom things growing in his arm, and if you know anything about Daredevil, he has these enhanced senses, okay, so he can connect through those senses to the fungus that has taken over New York City or whatever, and through that he can track down the villain. In a very odd turn of events, the villain says things like bro and simp and what was the other one? I don't know. He says a lot of slang terms that are very odd to hear in a Daredevil book, especially from a weird mushroom monster. Now, the mushroom monster, spoiler alert, turns out to be the nephew of some rich people who are abusing their tenants. So you do have the cool Daredevil tie-in right there of him trying to help people as a lawyer. So that was pretty neat. Before that, I read The Avengers. All right. Basically, this is during the One World Under Doom crossover event. So all the other Avengers were off doing Avengers things. Meanwhile, Sam Wilson, Captain America, and the Black Panther are stuck on the Avengers base, and they have to fight a big group of bad guys. It's alright. I didn't really feel connected to the story. The art was lacking sometimes, but it was interesting enough. So then, let me tell you about my favorite comic that I've been reading lately. I've seen things that I've never seen in comics before. If you have not checked out Absolute Martian Manhunter, okay, this comic is phenomenal. It makes you think about all kinds of stuff. I think it was in the first issue. They have a drawing at the bottom where it tells you to hold the comic up to the light, and then they have a design that comes through from the light through the page. As an artist, my brain melted. I thought that was the coolest thing. Now, the writer is also phenomenal. We've had a really interesting story. This is basically a detective, and he barely survives a terrorist attack or some sort of bombing. He barely survives, but he does survive, and then he starts seeing this green guy. It's hanging out. The green guy is obviously the Martian Manhunter, right? And now he has this whole nother sense, so he can see what people are thinking, and he's trying to solve cases. The White Martian, which is obviously the main villain from the regular line of comics, is also the main comic villain in this story. So super interesting stuff is going on there. I highly recommend you check it out. The writing is crazy. The art is crazy. It's very, very different than our usual DC Comics stuff. And I'm a big comic book guy. I'm very much a fan of DC and Marvel and Image and everything else. But this is a breath of fresh air that I did not see coming, and I'm very excited about it. Okay, so what can we take away from all of that stuff that I just talked about, me watching things like the Fantastic Four movie and Summer Slam, reading things like The Sun Also Rises, and any number of superhero comics? What can we take away from that? Well, I would say the main thing you can take away from that is the importance of developing character. Okay, so think about a while back when I was talking about the Fantastic Four. The main thing I said was that Galactus looks cool. All right, and then right after that, I went into a long discussion of the importance of each of those characters and what is so exciting, what makes those characters stand out to me and other movie viewing audiences. And I talked about how I felt something, right? Johnny Storm, instead of just being the hothead little brother of Sue Storm, instead he's a hero in this, and when he is in trouble, you feel like you're worried about him and things like that. So I thought that's something you get from all of these, right? That's the Fantastic Four movie. Like I said, Reed Richards, he was a character that you cared about. You wanted to see him come to terms with solving a problem without messing up his family. You want to see Johnny Storm save the day because he is trying to prove himself to be a hero. Sue Storm is developing herself as a mother, and she's pretty much leading this entire team. And she's the one that stands up to Reed when he goes too far in some of his ideas. And she's the one that stands up to the rest of the world when they're asking them to give up her baby. The Thing, you're getting to see, we didn't see too much of him, but we saw enough of him and how he is really fitting into the family dynamic. So Fantastic Four, they did a great job writing characters. So as a creator, I know, and hopefully you as an audience knows, that you need to really focus on making your characters. That's almost more important than the story, right? More than the actual story itself of the Fantastic Four movie, I was impressed by the characters. All right, now let's look. The next thing I watched was Summer Slam. Right, in Summer Slam, what did I tell you about? I was very excited by the Roman Reigns Jey Uso match. Okay, that match is all built on characters. All right, you have Braun Breaker and Big Bronson Reed. Those two guys have been being built up over the last few weeks as the next big bad guys, and we've gotten to see about how Big Bronson Reed has developed respect for Seth Rollins after he beat him up last year, and you've seen how Braun Breaker wants to be the next big guy, right? So you're developing a connection to these characters that makes you care more about them. It makes you dislike them because they're supposed to be the bad guys, but you care about them, which is what they were going for. Obviously, on the other end of that, you have Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, who has been built up to be probably their biggest star right now, other than maybe Cody Rhodes, right? So Roman Reigns, you care about his character. You care about how he is redeveloping himself, recreating himself, following the collapse of his original bloodline, following the loss of his title and his friends and his family and all of that. So you care about his character. Jey Uso's entire success is built on that everyone likes him. So by working your characters, by making sure that you have clear good guys and clear bad guys, you can really make your audience do or think what you want them to. So yeah, sometimes you might want to make it more of, I don't know, you might want to make it more morally ambiguous, right? Sometimes you might want to have a hero that does bad things or a bad guy that does good things. That way you add another level to your story. But depending on what kind of story you want to tell, you might think about not doing that. Think about focusing more on a good guy that is a good guy and a bad guy that is a bad guy. That'll make your audience easier to sway, to really care about what you're writing. Next up, I talked about The Sun Also Rises. Like I said, that story, there is no real climactic moment. There is a fist fight toward the end that you could probably say is the climax of the story, but the story carries on right after that. The sun also rises. See what I did there? After that. And it's not the end of the story because the plot was not necessarily what was important there. What was important was the characters. So again, you really need to focus on developing your characters. That's what I'm going to take away from all of these works. That's what I hope you, the audience, will also take away. All right? And then, like I said, all those comic books. So what did I just show you? I showed you the Absolute Martian Manhunter. It's a detective that is trying to do the right thing despite barely surviving this crazy bombing, this crazy incident, right? So you have a hero that is struggling with something, but he's trying to overcome that. And I think that's very powerful. In the Daredevil story, okay, Daredevil himself, the reason that he is my favorite comic book character is that he's such a complex character. But that story, remember I just complained about the mushroom guy saying things like bro and simp, okay? He doesn't have much of a character. He's just kind of, I have superpowers and I want to use modern slang for some reason. All right, so I think that that character, if it had been developed differently, would have made me care more about him. Okay, so that's a lot of the things that I think that I would like to use based on all the things that I have watched and read the last couple weeks. So next up, tip or trick that I use for drawing or writing comics. Out of the gate, I want to just talk about knowing your plot structure. Remember I talked about earlier the hero's journey? I'm going to talk more about that in future episodes. But the hero's journey, it's just, I think it's one of the best ways to put together a story. And I really hope that you check it out because it helps me astronomically, okay? When I'm trying to decide where should this story go, the hero's journey helps me put my ideas into a storyline. Now I know that at this part of the story, I should try to have this type of thing happen. And that helps you really develop a story from there. Now you could pick any type of plot structure, right? A lot of people use the rising action, the climax, falling action, resolution. You can do that. You could use a 3-act structure, or you could use the hero's journey. You could use whatever you want. But I do highly recommend finding some type of pattern or some type of writing tool that will help you develop a plot. That way, the easy part sometimes is coming up with characters, but once you have those characters, you need them to do something so that your reader sticks around. So my tip or trick of the week goes the writing part of the process, and that's just saying to focus on having some type of pattern to follow. I think that will really help you and me and everyone else develop and create better stories. So just kind of what am I working on this upcoming week? All right, so like I said, during that Roman Reigns Jey Uso match, I started a sketch. I did it in pencil, then I traced it and inked it with my different markers, and now I'm going to put it into my iPad. I'm going to color it. It's going to hopefully be really good. I'm going to post that on the World of Whitt Studios Instagram page. I've had a lot of art that I've been posting there recently. We've been building a lot of followers, which I'm very thankful for right there. So I'm going to continue to be posting on my Instagram throughout the week. I'm going to be posting my 6 comics, like I said, Cosmos in Crisis, Nice Stories of Sheriff Family, Lil Poochie and Baby Nugget, and Villainous Vector. We'll have 6 episodes come out this week. So 2 of Cosmos, 2 of Nice Stories, 1 of Lil Poochie, and 1 of Villainous Vector. So all of that's coming out this week, and it will all be very exciting. During the week, I will be working a lot on the art. I'm working on the art for Cosmos in Crisis Part 2. I am currently finishing up the pencils of that. Also, I'm going to be working a lot more on Nice Stories of Sheriff Family because I will be uploading, we'll be moving on to the next storyline pretty soon. So I want to make sure that I have all of that ready to go so you guys have as much content as I can possibly give you. Let's see, final thing that I'm working on this week. Obviously, this is my first ever episode of a podcast. So I'm going to be editing this throughout the week. I hope to have it up later this week. I'm going to be recording a couple more episodes. That way I have a few episodes ready to go for my audiences to listen to. So I'm also going to be editing the video for it. That'll be a lot of fun, I'm sure. And just kind of putting a lot of work in. I really would like to expand World of Whitt Studios as much as possible. So I'm putting in all the effort. In future episodes, I do plan on having other creators come in and talk for a little while. I have a friend that's in a band who has a new album dropping, so I'll have him come in, talk a little bit about his project. I'm going to be reaching out to a lot of smaller comic creators, seeing if they'd like to come on here and tell me a little bit about their work. So we're going to have a lot of that coming up soon. If you have a comic or if you have some type of project you are working on and you'd like to share it on this show, by all means reach out to me. I'd love to get you on here and we'd mic you up and get you talking. So next up, let's go ahead and summarize. Basically, the moral of today, I talked a lot about the different comics that I'm publishing right now. I talked a lot about, like I said, Cosmos and Crisis, Nice Stories to Share a Family, Lil Poochie and Baby Nugget, and finally, Villainous Vector. I talked a lot about the different things that I've been watching and reading, okay? Specifically, I talked about the Fantastic Four movie. I talked about what I liked and didn't from that. I talked about WWE Summer Slam for 2025. I talked about what I liked and what I thought worked and didn't work from that. Then I talked about The Sun Also Rises by Hemmingway. I thought that was very interesting. We talked a lot about the character development there. We talked about the strengths and weaknesses of that. Finally, we talked about a few different comics that I've read. I talked about them briefly. On future episodes, I plan on talking a lot more about the comics. I'm a huge comics fan, and I would like to talk more about that in the future. So just to let you know, that's something we'll be discussing a lot more. All right, finally, so why creating is important. I really do think that the creative process, drawing, writing, singing, playing music, really anything that you can think of where you're creating something is super important. It gives you an outlet. It lets you, it lets you feel something, and it lets you connect with yourself in a very special way, and hopefully connect to others. Like in this podcast, I hope that you guys will walk away thinking that you either A, learned something, or B, thought about something, or C, will be checking out all 4 of those comics on Webtoon, Tapas, Global Comics, or Comic Fury. So that's about it for this week. I can't wait to keep this going. It's been a lot of fun to talk to you today. So this was World of Whitt Studios, The Creative Process. See you again next week.